I mean, if ESG are so important, how can we possibly get behind the backlash and try
Well, it's
to?
right. Right. I mean, that's a great question because, the politics is driving the backlash as of now, although some of the backlash is being driven by genuine concern about the nature of ESG ratings. Now, the, the the question is complicated. To solve the problem, you need solutions to both. One is that the ESG itself has to become more defensible, which means less easy to attack. Today, anyone can look at ESG ratings, compare a few, 3 or 4 leading ratings like MSCI and Sustainalytics or Refinitiv or whatever. Say, look at this. They don't correspond to each other. They don't look like each other at all. And that's true. There is a problem because there are so many different methodologies. Then you could also argue, as has been done, that ESG does not measure impacts, but it was not designed to measure impacts. It was just designed to say what is good governance and bad governance, and then what does it lead to in terms of good and bad environmental and social impacts in terms of, and then give you some ideas as to, maybe I can do this differently, maybe I can change my energy use, maybe I can be more concerned about my employees and have creche inside the office of the company so that mothers can look after their babies better. Maybe I can do so many different things to make myself more responsible as a company. That was what it was meant for. What it has been used instead is to become the means of rating an asset, a bond or an equity, and that gets in the way of the flow of money. And when you tell money where to flow, it doesn't like it. So that is the problem. So it becomes about money and politics, and that's going to be a problem. Even if we fix ESG and say, okay, and I can go to that if you want, how to fix ESG in terms of what is wrong with it. Shall
Please,
I?
please.
Yeah, you
Yes.
see, well, if you remember back in 2004, it was clear in the document that was written, Who Cares When, that governance is the driver, is the foundation of everything. Good governance in terms of the policies, procedures, and controls that are in place at a company to ensure that its key resources are defended and protected and enhanced. What are the key resources? Number 1, people. Number 2, capital. Number 3, reputation, right? So governance is all about policies, procedures, and controls to ensure that people, capital, and reputation is enhanced. Now, that should be rated separately. That's a whole separate area to be rated. And then you look at the results of good or bad governance to say, okay, have we therefore, as a result of good governance, improved our environmental performance? Number 2, improved our social performance. Number 3, improved our performance vis-a-vis employees, their knowledge and their skills and their health, human capital. That's about impacts. So after you've rated governance, you should move to measuring impacts. I think that has the real solution to this problem, which is that stop calling it ESG because it is already being attacked. It will continue to be attacked. It is a bad measure. It doesn't measure anything in particular. It has created politics and the flow of money in ESG assets, so-called ESG funds and ESG ETFs, exchange traded funds. It has created all kinds of things for which it was not intended. Stop doing that. Instead, do what you should have done, which is to go back to the 2004 document, measure governance separately, and for that you can use ratings, governance ratings. And secondly, measure impact separately. For that you can use economic impact. What is impact? Impact is the change in human well-being as a result of the activities of a corporation and its value chain. Impact is an economic quantity. Impact is about changes in produced capital, which is your shareholder interest. So that is obviously already there. Everyone measures and reports it. Produced capital, human capital, that is the health and knowledge and skills of your employees. Natural capital, that is all of the ecosystems, biodiversity, resources that are there for people to use forever, the public goods and services. And lastly, it's about produced capital, which you already measure. The land, the buildings, the factories, the copyrights, the patents, the software, and so on and so forth. So it's a collection of assets which need to be measured in order to be managed. And today we are only measuring the produced capital. We are not measuring human capital. We don't measure how good or how much is the increase in the knowledge and skills of our employees every year. Nobody does that. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't measure even human health impacts on the employees. So human capital is not being measured. Natural capital is economically invisible. That was the reason I had the project called TEEB, which you mentioned, the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity, which is all about how do we make natural capital from being invisible to being visible, right? How do we see it and then bring it into policy and so on? So all of these other impacts on human, natural, and social capital are simply not being measured. That has to change. And then we will have the real solution to the problem that you described.